4 episodes in, and we're finally getting an idea of what's going on in WandaVision. I've got my review right now. Hello everybody, and welcome to my review of episode 4 of WandaVision, which just hit the Disney Plus streams a couple of hours ago. This episode, there's really not a whole lot I can do without going into spoilers, so if you're going for the non-spoiler review, it's going to be very brief in that we are getting into the teeth of this story. I think that they made some structural mistakes by how they did the first few episodes, but I am now fully on board, and it's largely because of what we saw from really the very first frames of this episode. So I can't dance around the spoilers in this one because we jump right into this thing hot and heavy. Spoiler alert from here on out, because there's so much to break down about what happened on the show, what's been revealed, and things are finally starting to take shape about this weird reality that we've all been in. I feel like we were all just kind of thrown into the deep end on this one, for better or for worse. So blanket spoiler warning, from here on out, I will be talking about in-depth details of episode 4 of WandaVision. So when I talked about the first 3 episodes, one of the things that I mentioned to so many people was don't go on IMDb, because if you go to look and see who the actors are, they're going to tell you who they're really playing. And that is the case with Teyonah Parris, who, if anybody was going to IMDb to see who was playing Geraldine, you would see that she's not Geraldine. She is Monica Rambeau, daughter of Maria Rambeau, who we met in Captain Marvel / Carol Danvers' best friend, and she was sucked into this world at some point in the first 3 episodes. We're filling in that backstory on this episode, but we actually go back even further and fill in more backstory, because we open on the Blip, the return of everybody after they were snapped in Avengers Infinity War. We reveal that Monica Rambeau is one of the people that was snapped. She rematerializes in her mother's hospital room and is informed, you think you're having a weird day. You've been gone for 5 years. Oh, and also your mom passed away 3 years ago. Oh, and also you don't know where you were. I like that they brought us this little glimpse of the Blip, because we saw some video clips here and there in Spider-Man Far From Home, but we see just a small portion of that chaos when people just literally materialize back into the world. I hope that there are some opportunities to show even more of that in the Marvel Cinematic Universe. Well, we know there are going to be opportunities because they're making everything, but I like seeing those little glimpses into daily life, and that would have been such a big event. I hope they return in natural ways to show us even more of what that was like for everybody. From there, we also learned that Monica Rambeau works for SWORD. This was an agency that was started by Monica's mother, Maria Rambeau. So we now know that Maria Rambeau, after her friendship with Captain Marvel, would go on to start this agency whose sole job is to basically be an interstellar watchdog, to look out for the weapons that are off Earth. But Monica Rambeau, despite being one of the best specialists that the agency has, is coming back after 5 years gone, so she finds herself grounded and dispatched to Westview, the little town that we've been seeing for the first 3 episodes of the show, and that's where she meets up with Agent Jimmy Woo, making a return from Ant-Man and the Wasp, and still showing some of those nice close-up magic skills. I'm a mark for Randall Park. I will say that right up front. Hashtag mark for Park. But even given that, I thought that the reference to the magic and everything was very funny, a pretty clever nod back to a film from a couple years ago. And this is where we start filling in the holes from those first 3 episodes. We see that Monica was dispatched from SWORD to investigate this. We see that she is pulled into Westview. That's how she enters this world as Geraldine. We also see that that helicopter that crashed into the bushes was a drone that went into this weird barrier into the town. In answering some questions, they're posing other questions. You can be frustrating if you do that, but I think this show is doing it the right way, and as a matter of fact, I think they waited a little too long to start asking these additional questions. I think that if we had gotten into this one episode sooner, or maybe if they had restructured this so that we are interlacing this a little bit more with the beginning of the show, then I think it may have been a little less difficult for some people to jump on board. Those first 3 episodes, and really the first 2, were a little difficult for me, and reading a lot of reaction from people the first week that it came out when they dropped the first 2, I noticed a lot of people, I hope they didn't lose too many fans right off the bat, because they committed to this idea, and yes, we see these references and callbacks to it in this episode, but I think that they may have overcommitted to the concept up front in favor of setting all this stuff up later. The fact of the matter is that if it all comes together at the end, then it's not really going to matter. It'll be a structural issue with the show, but if it's a satisfying conclusion, then when we're all rewatching, that'll just be one thing that we remember. It all really does depend on the end game, no pun intended, with how they draw everything together, whether what we saw in those first 3 episodes was a sign that they were struggling a little bit creatively, or maybe just a risk that didn't pay off for everybody. We also get reintroduced to Darcy. We haven't seen her in quite some time. She is now a doctor. She is now an actual astrophysicist instead of helping astrophysicists. And she's the key to unlocking what exactly is going on. She's the one that picks up the broadcast, and we then realize that the thing that we as viewers have been watching is actually something that inside the show has also been broadcast as a television show that they're watching. So we've been watching the same show that the characters been watching. We do understand when they're watching particular episodes in the 50s and the 60s. We know what's going on because we've already seen what happened in those first 3 episodes. And I think that that's where knowing what happened helps. The question being, did we have to see so much of it to get to where we are in this episode? Or could they have intermixed this stuff a little bit more? Again, that's not a question for me, and it's really water under the bridge. It's really about going forward, and I think for a lot of people, and I'm recording this a couple hours after it went live, I haven't seen a lot of the social reaction, but my guess is that for a lot of people, this kicks things into really high gear because there's actually very little Wanda or Vision in this episode. It's all about establishing the outside world and what's going on, and I found this to be very intriguing as far as where it's going and where we're taking the story of Wanda and Vision, and now we have seen really the outside MCU and how they're going to mix in here. Like I said, I haven't really tuned into a lot of the analysis. I'm sure other people will have picked up on this and are going to notice this as well, but as they're doing all the research on the town and as SWORD and the other agencies are trying to figure out what's going on, one shot that they show where they're looking at a map of the town and they're showing the boundary, this weird mystical wall that if you pass it, you become part of the sitcom. Looking at that picture, it looked to me like in Infinity War when they were trying to extract the Mind Stone from Vision's head and Shuri was mapping out all of the circuitry and everything, and you saw those same patterns splayed everywhere. They don't match one to one, but they looked very similar, and while the Mind Stone isn't an exact hexagonal shape, it's close enough, and it made me kind of start to wonder if that's what's going on here, because we learn later on that Wanda has way more control over this world than maybe we thought in the first 3 episodes. Is this some sort of effort to recreate the Mind Stone somehow, to bring Vision back to life? Because one thing that we know from the MCU, with very few exceptions over the years, and even fewer in the more recent times, is that there little to nothing of what we see on screen is accidental. Everything has intention and purpose behind it, unless you're accidentally creating a continuity error in Spider-Man Homecoming. But, we've all put that behind us. Is this going to be something that is going to feed into the larger narrative of the show? I think it might be, and I'm sure a lot of people are going to notice this as well. So I think this show is going to be full of a lot of Easter eggs to go back and look at when the run of the show is over. Also on these big boards that they're putting together, we see that the cast members in the show are people that exist in reality. They are New Jersey residents. Are they Westview residents? We don't quite know that yet, but we see driver's licenses for almost everybody. I think it is notable again that the only cast member whose picture we see on the board that does not have a driver's license is Catherine Hahn's character. And this is where I should also note something, which is that there are a lot of people that are way further down the road on these characters in this storyline than I am, because they're into the comic book stories. They know what everything's being drawn from. I am one of those folks. I choose not to go that deep because I want to be surprised with where this storyline goes, and so I haven't done a whole lot of research into Wanda and Vision storylines. I know it's pulling potentially from things like House of M, etc., which are storylines that I know of vaguely but have not read myself. So I will plead ignorance in the sense that I have chosen not to do deep dive research onto the origins of what these stories may be, because I kind of want to know where the story's going naturally. So I'm sure that there are a lot of other folks who produce videos that can break things down as to where the comic book origins of these storylines are, but I'm really invested in this story as I'm learning it, and so that was something that I thought was very interesting. It's like she is this character who obviously knows a little bit of something, and also so far one of the only ones that they haven't been able to identify. So another fun little thing that you can catch if you're pausing and looking at the still frames like I was doing for this episode. I hope you don't mind, but I am feeling a little bit hungry. I don't know why, but the show, for some reason, made me just, I really wanted some baked lays. I mean, they are a delicious treat. Only 120 calories. Whether you're watching WandaVision or you're in WandaVision, baked lays really are a delicious snack. And I don't know what came over me. Here, you want one, honey? Here you go. Nothing like a good baked lay at 4 in the morning. So from here, we fill in the reality even a little bit more, and it comes much more sharply into focus that this is not something that is happening to Wanda. Wanda has a great deal of control over this world. In fact, it may very well be that she has constructed this world, because we see a little bit more of how Geraldine / Monica Rambeau has been ejected from this. We see Wanda manifest her powers. We see that she physically has ejected her. We also see that Wanda can rebuild this world. She rebuilds her house and undoes the damage from pushing Geraldine out of Westview. And so we know that she can eject people. We know that she can edit this broadcast. Every time we've seen her kind of get a do-over in previous episodes with the B-Man and also with ejecting Monica, it's been edited out of the show so that you can't see what's happened. She can rebuild things. So this very much seems like a world that Wanda has constructed herself, perhaps, and that is backed up by the fact that when Vision comes home, we see that she sees him as the completely dead version with the stone ripped out of his head, how we last saw him in Infinity War. It was such a disturbing visual. I was not expecting that, and when you just cut to dead Vision like that, especially because we've seen him as the kind of sitcom-y dad, it really was such a stark, again, no pun intended, contrast from what we've seen in the previous episodes. But I think that's what this episode really more than anything pulled together for me, is we are establishing that this is not a trap, or this is not something it seems like that anyone has built for Wanda or is manipulating her. It really does seem like she is constructing this for herself, perhaps as some kind of an attempt to bring Vision back. Again, we go to the map, and is this something about the Mind Stone? Her powers are the result of an Infinity Stone. Is she maybe going to be able to try to use that power? I think this is where the show is going to be going in the second half of the season, and I know it took us a few episodes to get here, but I am really intrigued about where it's going to go. And I also hope that they may, now that we know both worlds, they may intercut a little bit more between these two, because the sitcom stuff is great, but now that we know there's an outside world, I don't necessarily want to do another 25 minutes inside of an 80s sitcom before we get back to what's going on in the real world. I think everyone's caught up at this point enough that we can intercut between the two, but we'll see what happens next week. So we end this episode with Wanda sort of reconstructing her reality. We're back into the 4x3. They're the perfect nuclear family. It looks like maybe next week is going to be this 80s Family Ties-esque episode that we've seen teased before, but this was, like I said, very light on Wanda and Vision, very heavy on the outside world and the MCU, and I think you could say now we're cooking with gas. Now we're really going down the rabbit hole for what's going on. And it took us a while to get here. It tested my patience. I think it tested a lot of other people's patience. But now that we're actually underway, let's see where we're going. I think that there's some very intriguing roads and some very intriguing paths that we could be going down. I thought that so much of this week's episode was executed so well. You had a good balance of humor, a lot of darkness, a lot of mystery. This show has really balanced a lot of tones very well in individual episodes. Now it's time to see them mix those tones, which is something I'm looking forward to, because Marvel, more or less, sometimes they'll go a little bit heavy one way or the other, but has done pretty good at mixing tones. We are now into the heart of WandaVision. What do you think? Are you excited for the 5th episode? Do you want to know what's happening? Do you want to go more into the sitcom stuff? Were you having fun there? Let me know down in the comments below. Thank you so much for watching. If you want to see even more of what I'm doing, first of all, you can check out my review for The Little Things, which hit streaming over on HBO Max today. So if you got the streaming show out of the way and you want to hit a streaming movie, you can check out that review right now. Also, don't forget to check me out on Patreon at patreon.com/Dan Murrell. And I want to thank some of these patrons. These are some of my producer level patrons who are always around, always jumping in. We're having fun. We do Schmodown study sessions, watch-alongs, movie club, so much fun stuff. Please check me out over there. And, of course, my podcast, All My Movies, which you can see every Wednesday on the Schmodown Entertainment Network, but also download as an audio podcast on iTunes, Stitcher, Spotify, wherever you like to grab your podcasts. Thank you so much for watching. I suspect that I will be back next week with another breakdown of WandaVision Episode 5. Until then, stay safe.